Hey there, hi, welcome to the channel. I am Garrett, and in this video, we are talking about small space design, specifically focusing in on those living rooms. There's a lot we can talk about, and one of the first things I think you can do is work with built-in elements. And I always say this when it comes to small spaces. Built-ins are fantastic because they tick a lot of boxes. They fit a lot of the needs, and there's customization there, which is also great. Well, you could do built-in seating in a living room, sure. I mean, that's actually very popular with mid-century design. It's not what most people are going to do, however. So it's something to think about if that fits the needs of your space, but it's not for everyone. More so is about television consoles, those console units there, bookcases, potentially a fireplace, those sorts of things are built-in elements in a living room naturally. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. One is to, take things up higher or really build them edge to edge in so you get the fullest amount of space available. A console table, for example, only has a finite amount of space. It only reaches a certain level, and you can't squeeze it right between two walls or something like that. You're limited there. You have to have gaps of space, so you do lose storage that way. A built-in element doesn't have that because it completely covers the whole area. Let's take a media unit, for example. We can do a media unit, a modernized piece mounted to the wall, okay? What that does for us, one, we have a little bit of customization with the length of it. We can put a very large television above that and have something that spans further underneath it so we get a good balance there. But also, if we wall mount something like that, all of the floor underneath it is completely open. And then because we see more of the floor, the room immediately feels bigger. The walkways feel bigger. It just feels more open when you see that flooring there. There's a lot of things you could do and consider. I had a client who had a big column in the middle of her living room. And what we ended up doing was saying add on to the column, make a pony wall. So behind that area is a hidden place. We could do a desk, we could do storage. There's something different in that area because basically it's completely unusable at this moment. And we see all of that in the space. Adding in a built-in element or feature to your living room is a great idea. I would look at storage pieces and potentially dividing walls even. Sometimes adding a dividing wall can make a small space not necessarily feel bigger because it wouldn't be, but it makes it more useful. I actually had other clients who we said, they had two doorways into their living room, but there was nowhere for the sofa. So I said, put a pony wall in this one. You can see the kids through it when you're in the kitchen, but then you can actually put your sofa there and then, you don't have a sofa blocking off a doorway. Sometimes those sorts of things just make more sense in a space. So do not write off a built-in feature or an element in your small home, whether that's a banquette in the dining room, which is not a part of this living room video, and I know that, but it's an idea, or something like a built-in console unit or a television unit, bookcases, or something like that in your living room. Sometimes it takes a creative solution like that to really achieve great design and functionality in your space, and you may not be able to come to that conclusion on your own. If you are stuck, if you are struggling, you have a difficult layout, a floor plan, you just don't have the answers, or you can't pick a paint color or whatever, I am at your service. You can always book a one-on-one interior design consultation with me using the link in the description box down below, or going to intro.co/GarrettLeChic. Something else you can do at a small living room that I notice sometimes my clients don't do or they aren't thinking necessarily about is only having one walkway. Most people don't want to have a living room where somebody walks in front of the TV as they're sitting there watching it. It just is not naturally what we want. We want to be able to walk behind the sofa to get out of the space so we're not disturbing everybody, because I don't want to be on the sofa and have somebody disturbing me. So it's not always the natural thing to do to have a walkway in front of the sofa, between the sofa and the television. But in a small living room, you don't always have that choice. If you have two walkways that people are using, the living room is way smaller because a walkway is minimum 3 feet. You need 3 feet of space to get through somewhere naturally. And for it to feel fine, usually people like more, 48 inches feels more natural there, but 36 is the minimum. That's a lot of space. If you have two walkways, that's 6 feet of space we're losing in a room. 6 feet is a lot of space. And then, if you have a 12-foot living room, that's a substantial size living room for some people, okay? It's gonna be a big space. That's half of that. Half of that is completely gone. Put the furniture against a wall. put the sofa against a wall like I have here. The sofa is backed up to a wall. There's space here. I mean, I can fit my hand behind here, okay? It doesn't have to be pushed up completely against it, or maybe it can be, that's fine too. But put the sofa with its back to the wall, put the television on a wall, and then we float all of the other smaller things. The coffee table, the accent chair, maybe you have a bench or something like that, ottomans or something in the middle of the space. That way we can kind of move them around and place them in an area that feels natural to have a walkway through there, but it still feels like a proper living room. We don't feel like there's a big hallway cutting in front of us. Because if we have to shift the sofa forward, like if there was 3 feet behind the sofa, yeah, I mean, I could still have all of the same furniture here. I just wouldn't be able to get to the chairs on either side. I would not be able to get between the coffee table and the sofa. I wouldn't have that natural amount of space I need. So having one main walkway in a small living room will immediately make it feel bigger because we're centralizing, we're focusing in all of that empty space into one area. So it feels larger, it feels more spacious, a little more open, and you may find that you can actually fit bigger, larger, more oversized, more comfortable pieces of furniture, or even just additional pieces like an extra accent chair or something in that space that will get you more seating. Maybe instead of getting a sofa, you could then get a sectional and add a little bit of space there, some extra seating, a place to stretch out and lounge on. I love that for you. Only having one walkway in your living room though is the way to do it. Something I love in a small living room, I love all of the time everywhere, okay? And I actually talked about this in a how to modernize your home video, actually with a short, that oversized artwork is great in a small space. I love oversized artwork in a smaller space because we're playing with balance and scale now. What I mean by that is we have something that is really big that's drawing a lot of focus. This is the same reason we say to like, take your drapes up to the ceiling, because we want them to look and feel very tall and overwhelming because it brings your eye upward, it elongates the space. A large piece of artwork does something in a similar way. By elongating a space with drapes that go to the ceiling, we make the ceilings look taller, and that's wonderful. You can also stack them really nice and thick to make your windows look bigger and all sorts of things. Doing that with a large piece of artwork in a small living room makes all of the furniture feel smaller because we have one big overwhelming piece and everything else is lower down. That's higher up, this is lower down. So everything else feels smaller and it feels more open, it just feels easier to get around in, and that makes a small space look larger. Also, having an element that draws focus to it, like a colorful, a bold, a bright, a big piece of artwork. I love something with like a flashy gold frame on it. That's a great way just to draw focus to it. Even if it's a more subtle or refined piece of artwork, doing that really draws attention to it. It's not for everyone, okay, not for every home either, but a large piece of artwork will fill up a big empty wall, which you probably have behind that sofa. It's probably just big empty, you know, a lot of drywall happening there, and that's fine. But a big piece of artwork is a great way to fill it up and reduce the size of the furniture in the space. Even if it's like a big oversized poster, that's fine too. In a beautiful frame, that can feel very elevated. Even 2 posters next to each other, gorgeous. You could get an oriental folding screen. You can get a large mirror and do this same thing, the same effect to really enhance the feeling of the space. Mirrors are also a great trick to use in a small space or a darker space. They bounce around a lot of light and they create the illusion of more space. So that's something worth considering also. Tapestries are very in also. That's another great thing to think about. There's plenty of types of artwork you can get, plenty of places to find it. It's all about go big or go home. And when you think you have a big enough piece of artwork, think again, see if you can get it bigger. Because a large piece of artwork in a small space pulls a lot of focus, makes everything else feel smaller, and therefore makes that space feel larger. Now, a large piece of artwork can change your home and completely change your life. And something else that will change your home and change your life is clicking that subscribe button and joining us. Yes, shameless self-plug, and I love that for me. Become a part of our LeChic family by hitting that subscribe button. We post 2 videos every week alongside a lot of shorts content also, so be on the lookout for that as well. We talk about interior design, hardcore interior design, some fun videos too. Be sure you join us, become a part of our LeChic family. And if you made it this far in the video, don't pretend like you haven't seen the value. Hit that subscribe button, but also I would greatly appreciate it if everyone could give this video a like. Something I often tell my clients when it comes to decorating any small space, be it a living room or something else, is all about something feeling busy. Something feeling busy, adding more detail into a small space doesn't mean that it's a better design. It doesn't always mean it looks more expensive. Sometimes it just means it looks busy because we have so much to focus on. Your eye has to rest. It has to visually rest. And in a small space, there is a lot more movement because everything is closer together. So we need to focus in on refined details and less of them. We need to reduce the visual busyness of everything that's happening. And there's a lot of different things you could do or ways to do this. Number one is gonna be through a really strong color scheme. Sometimes in a small space, you want something that's slightly more monochromatic, slightly more refined and less high contrast. And that could mean doing everything light or everything dark, everything a similar tone, or having a really strong foundation of things. You know, like for example, in this room, I have white walls, I have a white sofa. But if this sofa was like, you know, sapphire blue, that would be like, whoa, we're looking straight at it. That would be the first thing we see. It would be really overwhelming to focus in on that. You wouldn't see the artwork. You wouldn't see everything else. You'd see the sofa, and on a darker sofa like that, you'd see all of the details. If there was tufting or something like that, you would see it. So sometimes having something that is a little bit less ornate, less busy, less detailed actually makes more sense because it allows you to pass over that and it serves as a background detail that we can later focus in on. We want to have mains and then we want to have like a background focus. And a background focus is going to be the majority of things in a smaller space. And it's all about being consistent in the materials you choose and the finishes you select and the details those have. So if I'm using wood tones in a smaller space, I'm not going to go with two really, really high contrast wood tones. I'll probably stick with one wood tone so we have a good foundation that we can build on top of. And I may focus more on texture than on pattern or color because that adds a lot of contrast and busyness to a space. And it's not just about, oh, everything has to be neutral and painted all white or beige or gray or whatever. You know I'm not that person. I love a good, colorful, bold, poppy moment, but let's make it count. Let's make it really matter. For me, I would do a big, fun piece of artwork like I have behind me, and then I might do a poppy floral arrangement, not a poppy as in the flower, but something that is bold and stands out and pops visually in the space that pulls from some of those tones. And then I might have an accent chair in that color or another detail over here. Maybe the rug has a little bit of that in it. That way there's good connection, cohesivity between the colors, but it's not super busy. It's all about refined details instead of just having a lot of them because more does not always equal more. Sometimes in a smaller space, more has to equal less in order for it to actually feel natural and to focus in on any of the details whatsoever. One of the most important things you can do in a small space is get the scale correct and make the space feel comfortable. And there's a few ways we can do that, isn't there, Arden? Oh yes. You're so funny. Okay, so one of the ways we can do that is by focusing in on the heights of furniture and things like seat heighting. That makes a lot of sense. It just makes that space feel more comfortable and easier to be in and enjoy, but also it balances out the scale when the furniture is a similar size. So, you know, this sofa, for example, I can tell you right off the bat, it has a 17.5-inch seat height. The back of the sofa height is about 32 inches or so, but my desk over there is about 34. They're a very similar height. They're not fighting or contrasting with each other, and because they don't touch, they're not super close to each other, you don't notice. But the chair over there has very similar dimensions because I want it to feel natural as a part of this seating arrangement. The chairs over there are taller because they're not a part of this. They're completely different. They're not friends with the sofa over here. They're in the same room, but they're not a part of the same thing. So having the seat height and the back height of chairs across the space feels natural because they just feel like they're connected because they have the same scale and they're in the same furniture layout. And that makes it more comfortable for someone else to sit in that chair or that chair over here and me to be over here because we naturally are looking at each other. Our eyes are at the same place for the most part. As long as it's all consistent, it feels natural, it feels correct. Other things that you want to be the correct height is like where your television is hung. I actually recommend a lot of my clients get bigger TVs because where I want them hung, if the TV is smaller, it just has a lot of empty, gappy-like space around it. It feels too insignificant for the space. So I wouldn't say like, go for a 65-inch. I might say go for like, you know, the 42-inch and then get a nice frame around it so it feels dressy. It feels a little bigger than it is because that naturally aligns with it being hung in the correct place and with my eyes aligning with the center of the television. It feels very natural. And that's something you also have to focus on, is where is your eyesight aligned within the space? What are we looking at? Can everybody see what needs to be seen? Does it matter? Like when I'm sitting on the sofa here, I'm looking at you in the camera there. Out of the corner of my eye, I can see what's going on outside. But if there was a television across from me, which there isn't, there's a great piece of artwork here, and I was looking directly at that, right ahead of me, I can see outside, I can see what's happening here and there and everywhere. I don't have big blocky pieces of furniture covering up any of that, or my eyesight, my lines of vision into any areas. We don't want to have that happen, which is why I always say, like, don't put a big floral arrangement on a coffee table, because one, it looks stupid. Okay, I'll be honest with you. And two, if someone is sitting in the chair that's the same height as I am here, I'm looking at the floral arrangement, I'm looking through the flowers at them. It's weird. It doesn't make sense. I want things to be lower in the center of the room so that we actually can enjoy them. So I have those lines of sight to see everyone and everything that's going on. And this applies to every room in your home. Living rooms, however, are a little bit difficult because a dining room, those lines of sight are higher up. In a kitchen, for example, you're not sitting down. Those lines of sight are much higher up. But in a living room where you are sitting, things tend to be a lot lower. So how do we make that work with the other spaces in the room? And those lines of sight also play a large part into whether a space feels small or not. If we have really tall chairs and things happening over here, the room feels more condensed because I can't see past them into the open areas. That's a big takeaway I want you to consider and think about. What are you looking at when you're sitting down? What can you see, and does it make sense? Can you see whether you're sitting in that corner of the sofa or this one, or do you have to be sitting in this one spot to view anything? That's also a big conversation I have with my clients, is where are you gonna sit and watch TV? Where is everybody else gonna be and sit in there and watch TV? Can they even see it? Does it make sense for it to be there? That all comes into play when we talk about layouts in your living room and all of those spaces. So once again, if you need a second opinion, I am at your service. Hey there, hi, welcome to the channel. I am Garrett and I am so excited because in today's video, we're talking all about small home design mistakes that are making them look even smaller and what we can do to fix them. Now, the first thing we have to talk about is actually the furniture layouts of each space. This has a huge impact on the way we visually see the space, the expansiveness of that space, and whether or not it looks large or small, no matter the size of it. And I want you to keep in mind that a lot of times when you see photos of spaces, they are using a wide angle lens, or they're staging them in an interesting way, or they're using furniture layouts that make them look more open. Now, how do you achieve this in your home? Well, there's a lot of different layouts you could choose, and I recommend checking out this video right here where I talk about the most popular layouts and how to do them in your home. But you can also work off of the principle that you want to look into a space. And that's a good thing to keep in mind as you're discovering and you're designing your space, you're figuring out your furniture layout, because I want to see the most of that space, the actual things we're gonna be using, and the floor as possible. An example would be, I want to walk into a living room and see the sofa and see the seat on the sofa. I want to see the cushions on the sofa. I want to see the floor in front of the sofa, because that's making it look more open and inviting for me to walk into the space, as opposed to walking into a room and seeing the back of a sofa. Now, you may have a situation where you have that happen, you just don't have a choice, but then we can work off of that and layer with the scale of furniture. So those actually take up less visual weight and we see the floor underneath them. And that's a big takeaway. I want to see as much of the floor as possible, as much of the corners and the baseboard in your space as possible, because it'll make it look bigger. In a bedroom, for example, you're going to make it look bigger by walking in and seeing the foot of the bed, having that in front of you. It makes it look more open and more expansive, no matter the size of the space. And there is something to be said for taking advantage of the layout you have. Sometimes you just can't use these principles in a smaller space, because often I find a smaller home tends to be a little older and maybe has more walls and less open concept, right? An open concept space feels a lot bigger in the same amount of square footage. If you see more of the floor, the home is going to look bigger, more open, and more accessible. So the main point I want to get across here is that we want to look into a space. I want to see the actual flooring area within that room as we first enter it. That's what's going to make a small home look larger, as opposed to blocking that off and closing that space in. If we don't see the floor, the space feels smaller, it feels more condensed, and that's the opposite of making it look and feel bigger and more open. Now, like I said, be sure you check out this video right up here to learn all about the best layouts for your home that will really make it feel more open and expansive. And if you're struggling with a smaller home or a larger home, you're struggling with any design questions, I am at your service. You can always book a one-on-one virtual consultation with me where we can talk about all of your design and decorating needs and what the solutions for them are. Be sure you head to the description box down below or go to intro.co/GarrettLeChic. Now, one piece of design advice you hear all of the time is to not push your furniture against a wall. People will say like, oh, rich people don't push their furniture against a wall, or, you know, designers don't do this. I'm sitting on a sofa that's pushed against a wall. Designers do this all of the time because it's about the needs of the space, not the perception of size or luxury or whatever. Sometimes the best answer for a space is to push the furniture against a wall. And that's the next mistake you are making, is that you're not doing that enough. In a small space, you're limited, and pushing the furniture against the wall, having the sofa back against the wall is perfectly acceptable because it gives you more floor space, makes your home feel and look more open and larger, and also it gives you more accessibility, and sometimes that's just what you need. A console table, for example, should go against a wall. It shouldn't just be floating in the middle of the room. But a dining table should probably not be pushed into a wall or a corner because it makes it feel very cramped. And maybe that's something we get creative with, or you do in your space. I actually have a client who has a small kitchen, and instead of adding additional cabinetry that would take away from the dining space, we pushed a table against a wall. It just made sense for the usability and the functionality of her kitchen, and it works flawlessly. So sometimes that's the creative solution, and you have to take advantage of the floor space you have. If you don't have a lot of it, push the piece of furniture against a wall. Whenever we talk about pushing things up against a wall, I always get inspired by banquettes in kitchens, like seating areas that are built in. If you have a smaller space, a small kitchen, that could be a really creative way to add that dining area in there, make it super functional. And it also reduces the amount of space you need because you don't have to have your chairs pulled out all of the way to get into there, right? It stays where it is, it's in place. That can be a really good way to add additional seating to a smaller space in a dining room that you need. They can actually be built in relatively easily. You can buy them that are pre-built and just sit in place there, which I think is great. My husband actually insists that the next house we live in has to have a banquette in the kitchen. A small apartment living room would be very similar to my studio, my office layout right here, where I have a sofa against a wall and I have two chairs opposite that. And I have a large piece of art on the wall across from it and behind my sofa. You could do something like that in a smaller apartment living room, trade one of the pieces of art for a television, add a console underneath it, and it's a perfect living room layout for a small space. In a small home, a micro space, pushing the furniture against the wall is the best answer. It doesn't always have to be a floated living room. That works if you have a large enough space for it. That's what I have in my living room downstairs because the layout of my house just works that way. But upstairs here in this room, it's just not possible, so there's no point in even attempting to do it, and that's okay. You just have to accept the fact that you're in a smaller space and you're accommodating that. So push some of that furniture against the wall and give us more floor space to walk on and see. It'll make your smaller space look bigger, larger, more open, and we can combine that with more open style furniture pieces, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, to make it look even more expansive and take the fullest advantage of the space that you do have. Another design mistake I see people in small homes make is that you are looking at larger homes for inspiration, which is fine, but there's sometimes things that we just can't do in a smaller home. One of those is to use too many colors, specifically your color schemes on your walls and the way that works within your furnishings. Having too many different colors in a small home will make it look and feel busy. When a space feels busy, it feels chaotic, it feels crowded, it feels condensed, and smaller. So in a small home, we don't want that. I like to be consistent with the wall color in a space, and you can even go as far as the ceiling color. Be consistent with it throughout each of those areas and spaces, and then we can layer in interesting colors and details and features through soft furnishings, through rugs, through upholstered pieces, through wood tones even. And you can have a lot of fun that way, still infuse color into your space, but neutralize all of the walls in your home to create a space that looks and feels brighter, more open, and bigger, and less chaotic at the same time. What do I mean by that? Let's not have accent walls all over the place, right? Like if you have one small living room, we can paint that one color, be consistent throughout it. And in the kitchen that's off of that, for example, it doesn't have to be through painting the walls. It can be through a window treatment, accessories you're bringing in and putting on the counters. It can be through the color of your dining chairs in that space. You can pull that color throughout the space and create consistency in a color scheme, and that'll actually make your home feel a little bit bigger and less busy and easier to take in. In a smaller space, sometimes you just have a lot going on, and having too much of that means we can't focus in, we can't relax. Our eye doesn't get the chance to rest and view the space and take it all in. So reducing the amount of colors you have all over the place is one way to do that. And that does not mean you have to do neutral everything. We're sick of it. I don't love seeing everything being white or everything being beige. You can have fun with color. You just have to be consistent about the colors you're using. In my home, some of the rooms are white, some of the rooms are off-white, but I also have rich, beautiful, saturated colors in certain areas. My dining room, for example, in my bedroom. Yes, I know I talk a lot about color and what you can do, and we love our white home lovers. We love the beige girls, okay? We know you appreciate the aesthetic, and we appreciate you, which is why, if you haven't already, you should take a moment and hit that subscribe button. Join us, become a part of our LeChic family. We would love to have you here, and I would appreciate you hitting that subscribe button, joining us, calling yourself an OG before we hit our 100,000 subscriber goal. I'd also greatly appreciate it if you would help me to defeat the YouTube algorithm by giving this video a like. When it comes to a small home, one of the design mistakes I see all of the time is that you get overwhelmed, you get a little frustrated, you get a little confused or blocked when you're decorating and designing it, and sometimes people just bring in a lot of extra stuff to compensate. So we have to declutter. That's the big thing. Decluttering, reducing the amount of visual weight of all of the busyness in a space makes such a huge difference. Getting rid of things that you don't need, not having extra things sitting in a corner, and sometimes that means adding more functional pieces of furniture. In a small home, you probably have a little less storage, but the interesting thing about life is that we all have to live it, and we all need things to do that. So whether you're in a ultra minimalistic teeny home or you're in a big, large, oversized, mansion house, you probably still need the same amount of basic things, and they're gonna need somewhere to go. Reducing the amount of stuff you have on like a table surface or in a corner, less is definitely more when it comes to a small home, but increasing the amount of storage space you have also is a game changer. And there's lots of creative ways you can do that. One is adding a storage piece of furniture, adding a console, adding a credenza, something closed that will get you that extra space you might need. Something else, a storage ottoman. That's great. I have clients who they have an Airbnb and they have a number of suites in that Airbnb. And one of the things I said was, put a bench at the foot of every bed, and that way we can stash extra bedding in there. It can be hidden away, and if a guest needs it, they can access it. You can incorporate that into your own home. If you have a big empty wall somewhere, or small home, small empty wall, you can add a functional piece of furniture, a bench. It adds additional seating. It's a beautiful way to add a soft furnishing into this space and another color, but it's also functional because it has storage. There are plenty of sectional sofas that have storage in the chaise part of it. That's a great piece to bring in to help you declutter and maybe add some off-season storage for things you're not using right now. Get creative about decluttering your home and reducing the amount of things you have. Because let's say your home is perfectly put together and everything is great and organized, and you open the cabinets and like it's all just full of everything. you still get that feeling of being overwhelmed by the amount of stuff in a space, even if you can't see it when you first enter. There's a lot of livability that happens when it comes to interior design. Like, we look at how do you enjoy a space, how are you using it, how do you function in that space, and sometimes that means you have to get rid of some of the stuff. And decluttering can be hard when everything you own is beautiful. I get it, but sometimes it's just what needs to happen. So focus in on those important pieces, those meaningful pieces, those sentimental pieces, and then start phasing through the things that really just don't mean anything, that's decor for the sake of it, and you could let go of. A top design mistake I see made in small homes is that everything is the wrong size. And by everything, I mean a handful of pieces, and we can really make a big difference just changing out a couple of things. You know, for example, furniture like a furniture set. I'm not gonna rag on it today and tell you to get rid of it or let it go, but they tend to be very bulky in some of the pieces. Like a sofa, for example, is a pretty average size, okay? They're usually a good size sofa in a furniture set, fine. But then we have a love seat or a two-seater sofa, and then you have the chair that matches, and they're basically just one-seater versions or two-seater versions of the sofa, and they have too much bulk to them. That's a piece I would say let go of. Keep the sofa and let's get rid of the chair and bring in something slightly smaller. But the same is also true of different pieces in your home. You can have too small of pieces. A lot of people also like smaller pieces because they tend to be more affordable, and you can kind of buy them over time and build up to having enough stuff in your space. But having too many small pieces, once again, brings us back to that point of it could be chaotic in your space to have a ton of little stuff all over the place. We're covering up the floor with a bunch of little bits and pieces. Well, that doesn't make your space look larger. It doesn't make it feel more open or more relaxing. It makes it look busier. So yes, you're getting functionality out of it, but it might not be the right piece. Sometimes in a smaller home, bigger is better. Getting a larger, oversized, media console under that TV is gonna be better than having two small cabinets or chairs or whatever cluttered underneath it. Something I also really love to do in homes is stack coffee tables, because I find the best shape of coffee table is either rectangular or oval, but those can be harder tables to find that fit the scale of a smaller space. So I'll stack two tables together. And that can be a good thing to do, but we're adding two tables in, so it looks a little busier. We need to reduce what's happening somewhere else. So maybe instead of getting two chairs to flank that living room, we get one. What I'm trying to get at is scale here. Scale makes a difference, and you can look back at any point in this video and pinpoint pieces that are smaller scale. A chair, for example, an accent chair. I like them that are more open. They don't have a lot of bulk in their base, that you can see underneath them. They have open arms because they feel smaller, even though they might take up a same size or even larger footprint than that piece that looks bulkier. You can do the same thing with a sofa. You can get something that has taller legs and you can see under it more, or you could get something that's smaller and more dense in its design, like the sofa I have here in my studio. It goes all the way to the floor. There's no feet underneath here. There's no getting underneath it or whatever, so it has a little bit of bulk to it, but it's a little thinner. So it's not a big lounging, reclining sofa. You have to think about how do you use your space and what can you bring in that's going to reduce the size or the scale of those pieces and make them actually feel more balanced. That's something to remember also. Add more vertical elements. They make your space look taller, they bring your eye up, and they actually make it look more open. That's why we say bring your drapes to the ceiling, because we like that big, long vertical element in the space. So look for artwork that's oversized as well. Having a lot of little artwork on your wall can feel very busy and very chaotic. One large piece is going to shrink down the scale of all of the furniture in the space, make all of that look smaller, which makes all of the areas we don't have furniture look bigger. Something else you could do in a smaller space is actually use smaller throw pillows and accent pillows on a sofa or chairs. Having big, oversized, or even square pillows, they actually have a lot of bulk to them, so sometimes it's good to reduce the scale of something with a smaller pillow. The correct size rug will also do that. Instead of having a smaller rug, one larger one that actually extends underneath the furniture. If your furniture is backed up against the wall like we already talked about, I don't think you need to bring your rug to the wall, but like halfway, 3/4 of the way under that furniture is a good place to bring it, but it will make that furniture area look more defined and actually look bigger than it is. So you can actually make a small space look bigger by bringing in bigger pieces that fit that space correctly. And my last tip for a small home that you need to remember, absolutely don't forget, is to measure everything and make sure it actually fits. Make sure you can get it through doorways into that space if you're living in a condo or an apartment building. Well, there you have it, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure you click on this gorgeous little photo of me right here to subscribe. This video right here is going to tell you all about those layouts that I mentioned you need to know about. And this one right here, you got to check this one out because this is all about taking advantage of that small kitchen your small house probably has. And I will see you over there.